Thank you guys for being here. I don't know who of you was in Bangkok at the original DevConflict. Okay, few people. So the idea of this format was to take a contentious ecosystem debate and have two people go up against each other. So I'm just the person kind of like poking both of these people. The topic today is adoption versus ownership. Can we have both? I think we all know what we mean by adoption. Maybe I can say a few words about what I mean by ownership, okay? So when we kind of started this entire blockchain endeavor, it was clear that this was meant to be an ownership revolution, right? Kind of like this was not a technology to kind of make existing banks more efficient or to kind of, it wasn't meant to be an upgrade, it was meant to be a paradigm shift. And as we've built for adoption, for users who obviously have limited tolerance for bad user experience, we have often regressed into this state of affairs that we know from Web 2, where kind of you're owned by the system. So kind of like if you think about yourself and what you do online in Web 2, so kind of like your emails are on Gmail, you have your docs on Google Docs or Dropbox, you use Facebook or Twitter, so kind of basically you rent your own information back. Your pictures are in iCloud, and the kind of big companies kind of own to some extent, kind of like you're renting your identity, you're renting your audience, you're renting all of this, and kind of big tech companies have become landlords. And this is kind of what we try to kind of break free from. And in some ways, we're kind of regressing in Web3. So kind of this is what I mean by ownership. So my first question to both of you is, what's the minimum level of ownership that users should have in order for us to still call this Web3? So kind of like, is it full self-custody, delegated ownership, social recovery, or can we just call anything self-custodial Web3?
Who wants to start?
I can start. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the self-custody is just as long as you own the private key for like interacting with a smart account or like a regular EOA, externally owned address, I would call that self-custody. Yeah, I would start with that. What specifically would you?
So kind of, for instance, if there is a smart contract account, in principle, kind of like you have a key, but someone else also has a key, and someone else can kind of upgrade the account for you and so on, do we still call that self-custody because you have a key? So kind of like how much control were you meant to have in the first place, and how much of that, I mean, would you have to give up in order to kind of not call this Web3 anymore?
I feel like if people can do anything against your own will, then I would not call that self-custody. So if you give ownership to specific actions and those actions can override your own actions, I would say it's not self-custody anymore.
Okay.
So let's go back to the question, right? What was like what should the minimum
be for something to kind of qualify as Web3?
Yeah, to qualify as Web3. Well, it's an interesting question. I think, personally, I hate the word should. I despise it, because basically when one's saying something should happen, it's basically saying I have certain models of how the world works that I'm going to like just project onto the world with all its complexities and nuances, and you need to live in my worldview, not in the real world. So, sorry, minor nit. But it kind of gets to the heart of it. Like we're building like a permissionless network in Aztec. So how much should permission, like self-custody, should someone have? It's, well, partly it's not really for me to say. I do have opinions though, and I think I'm a little bit more, oddly, normally I'm the purist between us, but I'm actually a little bit more flexible than you, because I think that pure self-custody is going to struggle to scale. As in, like, not your keys, not your crypto. That's something that's going to scale to mass adoption, to people who are not sophisticated with technology, particularly if private keys are linked to a single device who uses the device. good luck, goodbye. So what is the trade-off space? What's the spectrum here? You have things like social recovery, where if certain trusted parties all collectively agree, then they can recover an account, ideally on behalf of somebody, but in theory they could overrule somebody's actions. With privacy technology, you also have the thorny issue of who can see your transactions, and if you're doing something in a regulated space, real-world assets, maybe for certain ecosystems, you may have conditions where maybe a regulator is going to insist that they need to see something. And so, like, for example, what about a multi-party computation scheme where you have the user, you have a regulator, and then you have some institution that's basically supposed to protect the user, like angry privacy advocates. And the angry privacy advocates and the regulator both need to agree, okay, this thing needs to be de-anonymized because it's actually North Korea and they're actually stealing funds and we need to see what's going on. So that's what I'm talking about on the spectrum of the trade-off space. I lean as strongly as I can towards self-custody, whilst maintaining conviction that we can make this technology mainstream, widely used, base-level infrastructure.
What do you think is needed to kind of make kind of at least optional self-custody to make that mainstream compatible?
To make it mainstream compatible.
And I'm not talking like your grandmother, right? Kind of like I'm talking kind of like your non-crypto friends.
I mean, they're kind of they're similar crowd.
I don't know whether you have any. But,
no, I mean, but like my non-crypto friends aren't that much more technologically literate than their parents and their grandparents. I mean, when it comes to this stuff, I think it's a very, very hard question, and because the user experience of Web3 is absolutely terrible. We're used to it, so we can tolerate it. But if you go to somebody outside the space, they're like, what the hell is this? What's a bridge? What's a portal? What's a layer 2? I thought I had ETH, but now I need to put ETH on this thing called Polygon, and now I need some different kind of ETH. What's going on? I don't understand. User experience absolutely sucks. And so the question is so what's an acceptable form of self-custody for a casual retail user is hard to answer because we don't have an acceptable user experience for a retail user. I think that at the very minimum, bare minimum, you need some kind of social recovery. I think that, honestly, for hot wallets, for small amounts of small values, I do think we're going to end up in a world where you use zero-knowledge proofs to log into your account through existing Web 2 platforms. For example, let's say you sign in through Google. So you have a smart contract with a ZK proof that validates a Google sign-in. On a network like Aztec, that whole process is hidden from the observers, so they don't even know you're using Google to sign in. Google gets a request from their service to log in to, but they don't know the platform. That solves a lot of the UX problems. It means that you can get account recovery, obviously through Google, but you now have this very large centralizing influence, which is that, well, it's okay for 1 or 2 accounts to use Google as long as it's not mandated across certain platforms. But if every account uses Google and every account uses Apple and every account uses Facebook, and you have this, and then they have an enormous amount of control over the ecosystem. And honestly, I think that's a tension we're going to start to experience, and we're going to have to try and find a way through and resolve. And I think the jury's still out there on how we actually figure this out.
Yeah, 100%. You already see that through things like Privy and all these embedded wallets, where a lot of the conversions, I feel like, for new users using a new app that discover organic financial primitives, they maybe don't even start with creating a wallet. They start with, hey, I've heard of this app to earn yield or to send stablecoins somewhere, and they just create a Privy account with their Google account, sign on. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So for example, in our case, at World, we built World App. Every World App account is a safe smart account. The way that we've thought about recovery is very similar. Right? From every private key is on the phone. And you can also, for example, use passkeys. I feel like a passkey is a good development in this space where people can self-custody, but also do things like recovery through iCloud or recovery through anything that can custody a passkey, think 1Password or other platforms. I think that's also a really good development. I'm trying to think where to take this. Can you repeat the question or? It's hard for me. Like we can talk about a lot of things, but don't necessarily know what to mention.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the question originally was, do you think self-custody is compatible with mass adoption?
Okay, yeah, I definitely think it is. There's going to be, of course, like a spectrum of self-custody. There's going to be people who are going to be hardcore self-custody people, and they're going to like manage all of their keys on their own, and like have hardware wallets, all of that, like people like you and I. But from what we've seen at World, like we have 38 million users. A lot of them, for example, are here. Like 33% of Buenos Aires citizens have a World app and use World. So I feel like there is definitely a lot of like self-custody design patterns that are friendly towards regular people, and they're going to be using them. The one that has worked best with us is an abstraction for fees with account abstraction, where they just we subsidize fees for them, but also just like being able to pay, for example, with tokens. So we also give DD to every user every month, and they can use that for the account abstraction payments as well. I feel like it's definitely compatible in a lot of ways.
So out of the design space that Zach mentioned, kind of say I'm a World user and I lose my phone. Yep. How do I recover my account? Well,
if you can back it up, you can back up your private key either to Google or iCloud. That's like the user-friendly one, or you can export your private key as well. Okay. The exporting your private key is a bit hidden in like special settings, mostly because the average person can also be easily subjective to social attacks. Yeah. So essentially social engineering, where if you go get verified, someone downloads it, people will like try and like wait and like ask someone to like reveal the private key, and the user doesn't know what a private key is, so they will like maybe share it or be compelled to do it. So there's also like a 3-day delay period for being able to view your private key. So that's like one thing that we do. I think Zach also mentioned like the sort of de-anonymization, right? Because in the context of Aztec, you're fully private. This is sort of like an extension of that, where like if you truly have like a private wallet, there's even more considerations towards self-custody because you also have privacy. I feel like that opens a different kind of worms, where like if you're interacting with some kind of financial protocol and you're maybe not paying taxes on like profit or things like that, then the government might actually want to know what's going on, and there's going to have to be like some kind of like shared viewing key that can be decrypted in MPC or things like that. Well, I think that's also something you touched upon.
So here's the thing, right? Like there's a real tension here, because obviously governments, regulators, they don't want to accommodate these technologies. They just want to say, I want to see everything, give me everything, and if you can't, then go F yourself. And in reality, like we can build much more efficient, more secure systems where that information is not revealed. For example, you were saying like things like, to pay taxes and things like that, like government needs to see your transactions. Well, they actually don't. What they need fundamentally is zero-knowledge proofs of your transactions. Like how much you've transacted, like the notionals, what's coming in, what's going out, what's expensable. And in theory, you could hide that from them and just give them the receipts, like the outcome, and say, look, I proved that this stuff was correct. I owe you, I don't know, I owe you $50,000, now go away, please. Now, they won't accept that today. And I think it's, once we start to build these systems, it's going, like, we need to really, with A, show what's possible, and B, advocate very strongly for them, and not just, like fully capitulate, saying, okay, yeah, like, well, yeah, I mean, we can build systems where you have a backdoor, but if you have a backdoor, so does everyone else. Yeah. And this is something that we're going to have to navigate. But, with Aztec, it's particularly challenging because none of this is protocol level. It's all application level, right? If an app developer says, yeah, I'm going to put backdoors into my stuff, it's like, yeah, okay, good for you. But we want to provide the tools and the resources and the technologies to make it possible to create like viable applications where you know that you're not helping bad actors, but you're still protecting the user's privacy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. 100%.
We already touched upon this slightly. Usually kind of like centralization happens out of convenience, right? Kind of it's usually because it's the easiest thing. Do you think there's ways of kind of creating that convenience without the centralization that we've seen so far?
I mean, it's why blockchain is a thing at all. And it's because it has an incredibly unique property that no other kind of platform has, which is permissionless composability. this is the force multiplier that normally you can only acquire through vertical integration in large companies. You know, on Ethereum, on Solana, on any of these platforms, if I write a smart contract that does some random thing, issues some random credentials, whatever it does, right? Anybody else can come into that ecosystem and they can build an application that incorporates what I built into their app. They don't need to ask me for permission, and I can't tell them no. And this creates phenomenal network effects. It means that you can have a large crowd of like random people, which is like the people at DevConflict, for example, like all building applications and products and services that just serve their own interests, either as a person or as an organization, yet they're contributing to the whole. You don't get that in centralized organizations.
Yep.
You actually get the opposite, where you get like empire building and fiefdom making within these institutions where people start to protect their territory. And so it's going to be a fight for the ages. We're going to see which efficiency matters more. Is it the efficiency of vertical integration and centralized decision making and coordination, or is it the efficiencies of permissionless composability? I see my responsibility as like a technologist and a developer in this space is to improve the quality of our technology so that it's less of a trade-off, so that you can benefit from permissionless composability without having to make horrific sacrifices in the user experience of your products. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I also would add not just like not make any sacrifices, but I believe that crypto technology can strictly make better products than any of the vertically integrated centralized ones. Because like as you mentioned, like crypto, like with permissionless composability, there's also things like censorship resistance, like almost instant settlement, not having to trust third parties for settling transactions between each other. I feel like one of the sort of core principles that world sort of abides by is just trying to build a better product, but not sacrifice the values of sort of the space that we have here. So you definitely can build products that are strictly better than the centralized sort of vertically integrated ones through the permissionless composability, as you mentioned, and integrations of all these things, because now you can do just much more. You have much more tools at your disposal. And a lot of the trade-offs that we've been making have been mostly solved, whether it's like scalability or user experience. A lot of these things are being solved, I feel like, personally.
Okay, this is where I disagree. I think this is the engineering brain stuff, and I say that because I have it too, and it's kind of been beaten down through years of hard experience, which is that internally, we see a path to solving them. We know how to solve them, in the same way that an engineer may know how to build a product, and then massively underestimates how long it'll take to ship. As in, yeah, we know how to solve them, but no, we have not solved them yet. I mean, there's a reason why the worlds we're talking about aren't products and services. Aztec is still it's like not fully launched yet. You can't put transactions on mainnet. Like World, for example, its ID system is not like a canonical ID system that's used within Web 2.
Yep.
We still have an enormous amount of work to do, I would argue.
Yeah, I think so, but I'm not saying that we've solved things yet, but I definitely think that our technology can build much better products than centralized things. So like, if you present the user with a strictly better product, they will adopt it just as a virtue of that. So like, I feel like a lot of us who are idealistic, we want them to adopt them because of the ideals that we have. I want people to adopt our ideals because we can build better products with those ideals, not the other way around. No,
I agree completely.
Yeah.
But just to highlight the scale of the challenge, right? We're at the DeFi Scaling Summit. So Cloudflare has been a very popular organization lately, given their outages. Cloudflare in 1 second processes, I believe, more requests than every single blockchain platform that's ever existed across their entire lifespans. You sum that all up, the transactions that those blockchains have processed is less than Cloudflare and 1 second of their requests. As in, the benefits of scaling and efficiency you get through centralization are vast. And we've got to somehow fight against that, somehow. Like, it's an incredible challenge.
But is it a one-to-one comparison, as in like like Cloudflare requests, like refreshing a website versus doing a DeFi transaction?
It gives you it gives you a sense of like
a sense of scale.
Imagine if you try to create a decentralized Cloudflare, it wouldn't be that much more performant than existing blockchains.
So identity is an important topic to both of you, and kind of you attack it from pretty different angles. Maybe you could kind of briefly describe kind of like what Worldcoin identity is like and what Aztec kind of sees in the identity space, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. So I recently wrote an article called The Future of Digital Identity, which is a follow-on to the same titled article from 2 years ago. So if you want to check that out, it's on my Twitter at x.com/dcbuilder. But yeah, it's just a prefix. The way that world thinks about identity, for one, we care about proof of personhood in the world where AI is prevalent and you're not able to tell apart like text or videos or images that are created by humans versus what are created by AIs is like really hard to tell them apart. So you really want to know you're interacting with humans on social media, video games, dating sites, and any kind of social platform on the internet and on the chain, etc. So we built proof of personhood by leveraging biometrics and cryptography to make it anonymous. So we have a privacy-preserving way of proving you're a unique human. And beyond that, we're also expanding to things like proof of passport and other things. The way that I see it is that you usually have some kind of credential. The credential has some root of trust. Someone issues a credential, and that's sort of what gives it value almost, because it's hard to tell apart like random data from something that actually means anything or represents something about an entity. And then you can use programmable cryptography, like zero-knowledge cryptography, multi-party computation, to make statements about yourself. And one of the core principles that we believe in is selective disclosure, in the sense that I can choose what I want to reveal to a third party, as opposed to giving all of my information to third parties or having third parties build their identity about me through interaction with their platform and being, as you mentioned earlier, like being essentially a slave to or us being rent seekers from these platforms who own our digital identity. So we care about building a self-sovereign digital identity framework where anyone can build clients, anyone can participate in the protocol, and you maximize privacy and only selectively choose what you want to disclose. And there's also like a huge challenge here when it comes to user experience as well. Like, how do you build flows that make it intuitive and yeah, but like that's the general premise of what we're building at World.
So what we're doing is, I mean, same desired outcomes, very different methodology and approach. The approach that I want Aztec to take, if I was to give my identity ideas, thoughts to a conference in a more traditional environment like Bloomberg or Goldman Sachs, I think they would laugh me out of the room, because our approach is this concept of holistic identity. It's very different to, say, World, where you have a central issue of credentials. Yes, you have MPC networks to prevent certain manipulation of that, but ultimately it's a central entity issuing credentials, and that creates certain amounts of network lock-in. What we want to do is create a platform where, because it's open, Aztec's programmable, private, anybody comes to that platform, they want to build some application that's going to be in a regulated space. They are going to need some kind of identity system, some credentials, and in the very early days, hopefully we make it easy enough, they'll build that, because they'll need to make something quite bespoke. Bit of a tangent. So there's a really important lesson from Bloomberg that we all need to learn, which is that Bloomberg realized that KYC was a massive pain in the financial sector. All these documents we've got to gather up, we've got to do all these KYC processes over and over again. So they were like, brainwave, let's do it ourselves. Like, we're connected to all these institutions. We'll do the KYC. We'll issue them the Bloomberg credential, and then they can reuse it, and nobody will have to do KYC again, and it'll be wonderful. And what ended up happening is they realized there are so many edge cases. Every single jurisdiction, every single asset type, every single interaction type has its own custom requirements for what they even mean by KYC, what they even mean by compliance, what they mean by identity. And so the number of edge cases exploded to the point where they could not handle the complexity as a central party. And they were like, forget it. It's not going to work. So how are we going to solve this? One-stop shops are not going to work. We want to create a decentralized ecosystem where everybody's building their own little credentials, identity systems, issuing credentials on chain for some sort of specific permission, whether it's, I can trade, mortgages on the Dutch stock exchange, or it's I'm probably a person, therefore I can claim an airdrop. And what we want to do is create a network of effectively meta-credentials, because once you have all these random bespoke credentials on your network, you can start to package them up and you can say more concrete things about somebody that are more useful to a wider set of participants and actors. So this is a very bottoms-up approach to identity that's never been tried before anywhere ever. But I would argue that's because the technology hasn't existed to try to execute on this. And I think Aztec is going to be the platform that will execute on this.
what do you say to that? Because kind of like you have the opposite approach. Kind of like you have kind of like where kind of there is a very clear issue of the identity, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're the first one because we have an economic motive and we have belief behind it, right? The reason why people issue credentials is because they want to get some use case out of it. The reason why there's not other third-party or manufacturers, or like manufacturers of our hardware, which allows you to verify that you're a unique human and real human. We want to have third parties build their own ORs. We want third parties to issue their own credentials. We want to have also this bottoms-up sort of identity network. We don't want to be the sole, like, hey, you're a human, you're not a human company. But we definitely believe that World ID as a protocol is sort of a good first step when it comes to doing that. The problem of a lot of identity systems is sort of like a chicken and egg problem, where either all of the people have this identity system and it's useful, or you don't have it and it's not useful, right? So like, how do you make it useful if you don't have the people? Well, people will start using it if it's useful to them, but it's not useful to them because there's no other people on it. So like, you need to solve it somehow. What we're trying to build is like the first network that you can use to sort of do that. And we're doing that through economic incentives, right? Like where you can claim WLD by being a unique human, and like the more people join, the more valuable it is for everyone. And there's an incentive for you to get verified, right? So you have an incentive to bootstrap the network, similar to like how PayPal bootstrapped their own payments network by giving people money over email so they can claim. So yeah, we want to be the first ones building it, and we are the first ones building like a credible proof of personhood. But also something you can do is like the original group of people can start issuing attestations, for example, about themselves. Like if I'm a unique human and or like me and like 1,000 other friends or 1,000 people attest to something about another person, like I say that this person is over 18, for example, and 1,000 people say that, and you have a proof of personhood attached to that attestation, it's much more valuable, right? So like you already start seeing these like emergent like network effects from at least having a fundamental network or like a foundation network that you can bootstrap yourself off of. I think we have the same viewpoints. We're just trying to build some like foundation infrastructure around like personhood specifically. And also one of the things that we've encountered like issues with is this fact that like it's really hard to build hardware, distribute, operate globally, right? Like you need to distribute around the world. There's like lots of different jurisdictions, data privacy authorities around the world that you need to have legal relationships with, external counsels you need to pay money so that you can like actually navigate the legal landscape in other places. So we also want to like leverage the existing tools like passports, which already have like some credibility in different places, to bootstrap the identity network even further. And then we want everyone else to start experimenting with all kinds of other credentials for their own use cases as well.
You hit the nail on the head with the passports things. And this is why I think, honestly, I think the whole orb thing is completely superfluous at the end of the day, to be honest. You were talking about all the difficulties you have with the hardware and the jurisdictions, and I agree these are problems. But if you, like, so don't do identity as a first party. Particularly because, okay, maybe I'm being a little cruel here. I really respect the project, so I'm just, I don't know, like panels are boring if there's not space. If I'm going to build an identity system on World, why would I do that when my product is effectively competing against a first-party product that the World network is building and deploying?
What would be the competition?
Well, I mean, I'm building an identity system, and so I clearly want I want a moat, right? I want people to be plugged into my identity system, so that they're dependent on my services, my software, my network. And so for me, I could view World as competitive, and they're the ones building the infrastructure I'm building on. That's unstable ground.
I mean, to me, the way that I see it is that in the way that World is built, or the way that there's like different iterations and things that are slightly different, but the way that I see it is that we can still build on top of each other. I don't see like why would someone think that it's strictly competitive.
There's products operating in the same space, and they might not be competing now, but I, as a developer, I've got to effectively trust not just you, but the entire World institution and its backers, possibly Sam Altman, that they're not going to change the script.
I mean, there's not trusting one single individual, right? Like if you have open source code bases, you have smart contracts, you have, if you have a truly like like if you deploy, like for example, Aztec, if it's a decentralized like layer 2 where you have like a stage 2 layer 2, you cannot change different properties about the system. If you have like a credible way of verifying these.
Yeah, I'm not talking about like that kind of like modifying contracts or things like that. Take an example of Ethereum, right? Ethereum, very neutral platform. I'm confident building on top of it.
Sure.
It's not fully neutral. For example, Ethereum is bringing ZK EVMs into its roadmap. If I was a ZK EVM provider on top of Ethereum, I would feel very betrayed. I'd feel rugged. Because that's basically them saying, okay, nice tech you've got there. I'm going to put that into the base layer now because it's really useful. You bet my lunch. Yeah, you've not censored me, but you know, it's competing products. And so, as long as World is continuing to build and maintain a first-party identity solution, I do think you're going to struggle immensely to get other people to build identity systems on top of World. Particularly those ID systems are core to their monetization model.
Yeah, of course. There's always like a trade-off here. I'm trying to think. I mean, like, where we want to get is essentially like we also believe in the fact that there is no way to get to mass adoption unless you get credible neutrality, because like you mentioned this, right? Like if we don't build something that people like want to adopt and they don't see like conflicts of interest everywhere, then we're not going to get to any kind of meaningful adoption, and the project would die anyway.
Yeah.
So what we want to create is something more like Ethereum than something like a centralized company, right? Like that's the whole point. Like Tools for Humanity, which is the founding entity behind World, is we want to become, or like I'm not at Tools for Humanity, I'm the foundation, but essentially like Tools for Humanity wants to become like one of the entities that builds technology on top of the World ecosystem, and so we want to like onboard all the other ones who might have like 100 different kinds of use cases or sort of needs and interests that might be conflictive with what Tools for Humanity as a product company is, right? Like Tools for Humanity has World app, but if some other company wants to build a product on top of World ID and use the World protocol and have a competing product, that should be completely like fine, right? Like the protocol should not have favoritism towards any kind of product builder on top of the protocol. So this is sort of like what I mean by I don't see an issue, where like if the protocol is built in such a way where anyone can operate and users can sort of tell apart, like, okay, this is an orb made by Tools for Humanity, this is an orb or like a biometric palm scanner, for example, like made by Nethermind, or this is something done by another party or whatever. This is sort of like, as long as the protocol can reflect that, I don't see an issue in the sort of product competitiveness sense.
I guess, we both want the same outcomes. We're just taking very different approaches, and ultimately, we'll see. You know, we're going to find out one way or another. Because, I mean, like getting adoption, getting traction on these systems, it's the challenge. And you know, I could talk a big game because Aztec, we're producing blocks in Ethereum now, but you can't put transactions through yet. That's coming very soon, so it's all a little bit more theoretical. But I think that our plan is, if you deliver a sufficient value proposition to people, then they're going to be willing to suffer a little bit of developer experience pain to get to realize their vision. For example, building financial instruments, like real-world asset financial instruments on Aztec on day one, it's not the easiest thing to do. It's a lot easier to do it on Aztec than anywhere else, I would argue. And so to get things a little bit back on track, when you were talking about like how to bootstrap our identity systems, chicken and egg problem, I think there's a relatively straightforward approach to this, which is just you copy the processes of the real world. You just copy the processes, and then you don't need an existing network of people because they've already, like, your new customers, they already have what they need to onboard. I mean, you mentioned passports as a good one, but like, let's think about in countries where you don't have strong national ID systems, like the UK, probably America too. Like, how does it work if someone needs to identify you? Well, generally they'll need proof of address. So they'll need a couple of utility bills. They accept PDF versions these days. Well, is it hard to wrap those PDFs in a ZK proof, extract some information about them, which says who, like basically reading part of it, saying, this is my name, this is my address. I'm not sure. I don't think that's particularly hard, particularly if you can have if you use things like ZK-TLS or something like that to know that PDF came from the authoritative source. But the thing about these, like that example and any other example I could mention, is they're very bespoke. They're not one size all. And so they're going to have to be built independently by a very large number of people, all serving regions that they care about for their applications, which is why I think the mass bottoms-up approach is the one that might work.
Yeah, I agree.
If you kind of look at patterns of adoption, so kind of like you guys have gone out and you've tried to onboard really normie people, whereas kind of like you're kind of taking this from the from the other side, right? Kind of like you speak to people like us first, right? Do you think this is the others' approach is somehow limiting? So kind of like if you kind of go from village to Argentinian village to Argentinian village with your orb and kind of like onboard people to the system, do you think kind of the network that you create kind of has the same potential to grow as when kind of like you start from a nucleus, and the vice versa? Kind of like, do you think kind of like that kind of the network has the same potential to grow if you kind of start from kind of a tiny, very homogeneous nucleus and kind of expand from there?
They're very different strategies, and I think they have different trade-offs. For example, like one of World's real key strengths is distribution. Huge numbers of people using World app, using their products and their technology. And then you take a look, for example, at like Stripe. I look at Patrick Collison's distribution network, and then he's going to plug Tempo into that, and like, wow, I'm so jealous of that. I'd cut my right arm off to have that, like all those point of sale devices, like ready and waiting to tap into a network like Aztec. I guess like the question is, do you want to go for breadth or do you want to go for depth? And for us, it wasn't really a choice, because for us to take the world approach of basically going into the world, getting users for an application with the token, and then going to developers and going, look, we have all these users you can service. Well, given our resources, we don't have Sam Altman, I'm afraid. So that wasn't really an option. So we're thinking, well, what can we do? Well, better to have 100 users that absolutely adore you than 100,000 users that feel rather ambivalent about you. And for Aztec, we see our users, particularly in the early days, firmly as being developers. And retail are the developers' users for building products and applications. So that's why we've been going very hard after developers. My thesis is that the demand from retail is there, and it's there in spades, and it is because there's an enormous number of processes and products and services that I believe will benefit massively from decentralization, from permissionless composability, but they have data protection requirements or privacy needs that mean that building on permissionless technologies is not, transparent technologies is not viable for them. And that if we make it viable, then those products we built and the users will come. We'll see if we're right or not. We're going to find out over the next 2 years.
Right. I feel like the approaches are different because the sort of goals of the project are also slightly different, right? Like you're building pioneering infrastructure and technology where now you first deploy the network, and now people need to build on your network to sort of like see like what kind of use cases and products they can build on top. Whereas we did a bunch of like pioneering technology in like biometrics, hardware, cryptography, and to some extent, but not as much, nowhere near as much as Aztec, and identity, right? But what we fundamentally wanted to build is a way to tell apart like who is human, who is not human, and that was the product, right? Like we're building a product, we're not building a network for other people to build products, although now that you have a network of unique humans, you have a distribution platform for a lot of people to build other products on top, right? So you have an actual platform as well. I feel like it's easier to defend a hill which already like has users as opposed to one where you have to like get all the users from either other platforms or completely like not know like from just like regular people, right, on the street. So what we're trying to do is essentially like now that you have these like 17 million people that are verified by the orb, 35 plus, 38, 36 plus million users that have downloaded World app. Now you have that, you have, for example, the mini app ecosystem in World app. So third-party applications can build apps, and they can distribute them through World app inside of the mini app store. You can like list your app in your app store, the people can download the app, and that's sort of like another reason for why someone in a local market might want to get verified, right? Like you're trying to add marginal utility to everything so that people can like have a use case they might want to download World app for. For example, we're doing a partnership with Tinder so that you can like verify your unique human, or Razer on the gaming side. And so this is sort of like a different approach, whereas like now that you have a privacy preserving like layer 2, now like people can build these sort of institutional use cases or other kind of use cases which weren't possible before, and now it's like a much earlier stage thing. Whereas we've used DVM, right? Like we sort of bootstrapped ourselves off of optimism technology, Ethereum technology, and it's like not 0 to 1 in a lot of senses. Like a lot of the things that we built were just about ripe enough so that we can take them, push them over the edge, and ship a product that is much easier to distribute. So yeah, like I feel like it's a different.
Yeah, I mean, Aztec
comparison.
are basically freaks, I think,
Yeah.
in this space. Because, you know, most, like, what's the playbook? If you read 0 to 1, you read Lean Startup, what's the playbook, right? Like, you ship a product as quickly as you can, and then you iterate, and you get customers, you get feedback, and you iterate, and you grow, and you grow, and you grow. And we looked at the space, and we're like, well, the thing we really want to do, which is to create like a private settlements and exchanges layer for, like, real-world assets, was the original vibe. Via a fully programmable private layer. We're like, well, we can't do that right now, and so we're gonna build it, and it's gonna take us 7 years, 8 years probably by next. It's gonna take us 8 years, and we're just gonna do that instead. We'll see if it pays off. We're gonna find out very soon.
Cool. Famous last words. Thank you both for coming on, and thank you guys for listening.